Rain lashed against the cobblestones, washing her blood into the unforgiving mud. She couldn't feel her legs anymore, only the stinging, agonizing cuts across her back. As darkness closed in, promising an icy death, the sudden booming clatter of carriage wheels shattered the night. Salvation or her final doom? The autumn of 1884 brought a bitter, relentless cold to the Yorkshire moors. Along the desolate stretch of the old York Road, miles from the gaslit comforts of Harrogate, the wind howled like a wounded animal. But the sound was nothing compared to the shallow, rattling breaths escaping Genevieve's cracked lips. She lay half submerged in a flooded ditch, her once fine muslin dress torn to shreds and soaked in a mixture of freezing rain and her own blood. Her ribs throbbed with a sickening, sharp agony with every intake of air. Her right eye was swollen shut. The skin around it bruised a deep, mottled purple. Hours earlier she had been a wife. Now she was nothing but a discarded corpse waiting for its heart to stop. Silas Grantham, a ruthless wool merchant whose charm had fooled her impoverished uncle into giving away her hand, had finally shown the full extent of his depravity. He had driven her out to this god-forsaken stretch of road under the guise of visiting a distant aunt. Instead, he had demanded the hidden sapphire necklace, the only heirloom left from Genevieve's late mother, French royalty exiled during the unrest. When she refused, Silas did not hesitate. He used the silver handle of his walking stick. He beat her until she couldn't stand, stripped the jewels from her trembling hands, and kicked her down the muddy embankment. "Let the scavengers have you, Genevieve," he had spat, the rain slicking his dark hair. "I'll tell the magistrate highwaymen. Took my beloved bride." Now, the cold was a mercy, numbing the searing pain of her lacerations. She closed her remaining eye, ready to let the icy water pull her under. Then came the rumble. It was a deep, rhythmic vibration in the earth, followed by the frantic splashing of hooves. Genevieve's consciousness flickered. Through the haze of her failing senses, she saw the silhouette of a massive carriage, black as pitch, pulled by 4 magnificent greys. The crest of the Duke of Ashbourne gleamed faintly on the door in the dim light of the carriage lanterns. Nathaniel Linfield, the Duke of Ashbourne, sat inside, his brow furrowed as he read over the latest parliamentary reports from London. The train ride from King's Cross to Yorkshire had been exhausting, and he was eager to return to the quiet isolation of Ashbourne Manor. He was a man of 32, hardened by a brief, brutal stint in the military, and embittered by a high society scandal that had left him weary of the London ton. He sought only the company of his hounds and his ledgers. Suddenly, the carriage lurched violently. The horses whinnied in panic, and the heavy coach skidded in the mud before jarring to a halt. "What is the meaning of this, Thomas?" Nathaniel called out, shoving the window down. The freezing rain immediately soaked his tailored coat. "A body, your grace!" his coachman yelled down from the box, his voice trembling over the wind. "In the ditch! The horses nearly trampled it!" Nathaniel didn't wait for his footman. He shoved the carriage door open and leapt into the mud, his polished leather boots sinking ankle-deep. He waded toward the embankment, holding a flickering brass lantern high. There, tangled in the dead thistles and freezing mud, was a woman. Nathaniel cursed under his breath, dropping to his knees. The mud immediately soaked through his trousers. He set the lantern down and gently turned her over, the breath hitched in his throat. Her face was a canvas of brutality, covered in dark bruises and dried blood that the rain was desperately trying to wash away. Her lips were blue, her skin as cold as marble. "Help me, Thomas!" Nathaniel roared, stripping off his heavy wool overcoat. He wrapped the thick garment around her fragile, broken frame. As he lifted her, she felt lighter than a child, her bones fragile like a bird's. "Is she dead, your grace?" Thomas asked, scrambling down the bank to assist. "Not yet," Nathaniel grimaced, feeling a faint, erratic flutter against her icy wrist. "We are not waiting for the local magistrate. Drive straight to the manor, and pray the horses have wings. If we delay, the cold will finish what some monster started." The ride to Ashbourne Manor was a frantic blur. Nathaniel sat on the velvet cushions, holding the unconscious woman against his chest to share his body heat. He didn't know her name, her class, or her history. He only knew the visceral rage pooling in his gut at the sight of her injuries. The cuts on her arms were defensive. Someone had tried to break her spirit, and then her body. When they arrived at the sprawling stone estate, the household was thrown into immediate chaos. Nathaniel carried her past the bewildered footmen and terrified maids, his boots leaving trails of bloody mud across the priceless Persian rugs of the grand foyer. "Mrs. Higgins, send for Dr. Arbuthnot in the village. Now," Nathaniel barked, taking the grand staircase 2 steps at a time. The housekeeper, a stout and unshakable woman, took one look at the bundle in the Duke's arms and sprang into action. They laid Genevieve in the Rose Room, a guest chamber of heavy mahogany and deep red silks. Dr. Arbuthnot arrived an hour later, his medical bag clutched in a white-knuckled grip. For the rest of the night, the room smelled of iodine, carbolic soap, and copper. Nathaniel paced the hallway outside, refusing to retire to his own chambers. He smoked 3 cigars, watching the storm rage against the stained glass windows, haunted by the image of the woman in the mud. Who would do such a thing? And why did he feel this sudden, terrifying urge to tear the world apart to find out? Genevieve returned to the world in pieces. First came the smell. It wasn't the stench of the muddy ditch or the damp wool of Silas's coats. It was lavender. Clean, crisp linen, and the faint, earthy scent of a wood fire. Then came the warmth. A heavy, down-filled quilt covered her from her shoulders to her toes. The agonizing cold was gone, replaced by a deep, aching soreness that radiated from every bone. Slowly, she forced her good eye open. The other was heavily bandaged. Above her stretched a canopy of deep crimson silk. The walls were adorned with intricate tapestries, and a roaring fire cracked cheerfully in a grand marble hearth. Panic hit her like a physical blow. Where am I? The afterlife? A brothel? She tried to sit up, but a sharp stabbing pain in her ribs forced a gasp from her throat. She fell back against the down pillows, her heart hammering wildly against her ribcage. Hush now, child. Don't move. Genevieve flinched violently at the voice. A woman with silver hair tucked beneath a pristine white cap stepped into her line of sight. It was Mrs. Higgins, carrying a basin of warm water and a fresh cloth. "Silas," Genevieve whispered, her voice a raw, broken rasp. She shrank back against the headboard, terror flooding her veins. "Please, don't let him." "There is no Silas here, my dear," Mrs. Higgins said softly, keeping a respectful distance so as not to frighten the poor girl further. "You are at Ashbourne Manor. His Grace the Duke found you on the York Road 3 nights ago. You are perfectly safe." A duke? Genevieve's mind spun. The highest echelons of society. Silas was a wealthy merchant, but a duke was royalty. If Silas found out she survived, he would come for her. He had connections with the local constabulary. He would claim she was a runaway, a thief, or a madwoman. The heavy oak door creaked open. Genevieve held her breath. Nathaniel stepped into the room. He was dressed impeccably in a charcoal morning suit, but the dark circles under his eyes betrayed a lack of sleep. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with striking aristocratic features and eyes the color of a stormy sea. His presence was commanding, filling the room, yet his steps were measured, almost cautious, as he approached the bed. "Leave us, Mrs. Higgins," Nathaniel said, his voice a low, rich baritone. The housekeeper curtsied and slipped out, closing the door softly. Genevieve pulled the quilt up to her chin, her knuckles white. She looked like a trapped rabbit, ready to bolt despite her broken legs. "I will not harm you," Nathaniel said simply, remaining at the foot of the bed. He noted the sheer terror in her eye. "My name is Nathaniel Linfield. I found you. Doctor, Arbuthnot says you have 2 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, and severe lacerations. You suffered exposure, It is a miracle you are breathing. Genevieve swallowed hard, her throat painfully dry. Thank you, Your Grace. Who did this to you? The question was blunt, cutting through the pleasantries. Nathaniel was a man who demanded the truth. Genevieve looked away, staring at the flickering flames in the hearth. If she told him the truth, that she was the legal wife of a prominent merchant, the law would require him to return her. A husband's right over his wife was absolute in the eyes of English law. She would be sent back to her executioner. Bandits, she lied, her voice shaking. I was traveling. Men attacked the carriage. I don't remember much. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. He was a man accustomed to reading the hidden motives of politicians and aristocrats. He knew a lie when he heard one. The defensive wounds on her arms were not from a frantic highway robbery. They were the desperate blocks of a woman who knew her attacker, who had tried to shield her face from repeated, calculated blows. Bandits, he repeated softly, dangerously quiet. On the York Road, in a torrential downpour. Who took the time to beat you within an inch of your life, rather than just taking your purse and fleeing? It is the truth, she whispered, a tear slipping from her good eye, soaking into the bandage. Nathaniel watched her for a long moment. He saw the pride beneath the terror. He decided not to push. Not yet. Very well. You may stay here until you are healed. No one will trouble you, he said, turning toward the door. What is your name? Genevieve, she replied softly. Just Genevieve? Yes, Your Grace. He nodded once and exited the room. As Nathaniel walked down the grand corridor toward his study, his mind was racing. Genevieve. She spoke with the refined accent of the gentry, not a common traveler. He entered his study, where his estate manager, Mr. Percival, was waiting with a stack of ledgers and correspondence from London. Good morning, Your Grace, Percival greeted, pushing his spectacles up his nose. I have the reports from Barclays & Co. regarding the estate's investments. Anything pressing, Percival? Nathaniel asked, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. Despite the early hour, just one matter, Your Grace. A rather large line of credit has been requested from the subsidiary bank we control in the city. The gentleman is looking to expand his textile mills across Yorkshire. He offers substantial collateral newly acquired jewels of French origin, quite valuable. Nathaniel paused, the glass halfway to his lips. Who is the man? Percival adjusted his glasses and looked at the ledger. A merchant, Your Grace. A Mr. Silas Grantham. Upstairs, in the quiet of the hallway, a maid walked past Genevieve's partially open door, gossiping with a footman carrying fresh linens. Says his name is Silas Grantham, the maid whispered loudly. Sent a rider from the village asking if the Duke would meet him regarding a bank loan next week. Inside the rose room, Genevieve's blood ran cold. The heart monitor of her panic flatlined into sheer, paralyzing horror. Silas was coming to Ashbourne Manor. The devil was coming to the very sanctuary she had just found. She threw off the heavy quilt. She had to run. Even with broken ribs, even into the freezing moorland, she had to run. But as her bare feet hit the cold mahogany floor, her legs gave out, and she collapsed in a heap, pulling a silver tray of water down with a shattering crash. The game of survival had just begun. The crash of the silver tray echoed through the cavernous halls of Ashbourne Manor like a gunshot. Downstairs in the study, Nathaniel was out of his leather armchair before his estate manager, Mr. Percival, could even draw a breath. Taking the grand staircase with reckless speed, Nathaniel burst into the rose room. He found Genevieve crumpled on the floorboards, weeping hysterically amidst the spilled water and shattered pitcher. Her bandaged hands were clutching her hair, her breath coming in jagged, agonizing gasps that threatened to splinter her fractured ribs all over again. Genevieve! Nathaniel dropped to his knees, heedless of the water soaking his trousers. He reached for her, but she flinched violently, scrambling backward until her spine hit the mahogany bed frame. "Don't let him in!" she screamed, her good eye wide with a terror so profound it made Nathaniel's blood run cold. "He's going to finish it! He will kill me and tell the magistrate I was mad!" "Please, I beg you, your grace, hide me." Nathaniel froze. His sharp mind, trained in the ruthless arenas of parliamentary debate and military strategy, instantly connected the jagged pieces of the puzzle. The bank loan, the textile merchant, the French jewels offered as collateral, the battered woman on the York Road who lied about highwaymen. "Silas Grantham," Nathaniel said softly, his voice dangerously low. "The man requesting the line of credit from Barclays Bank. The man with the French jewels. He is your attacker." Genevieve squeezed her eyes shut, a fresh wave of tears tracking through the fading bruises on her cheeks. She gave a single, slow nod. "I am his wife," she whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Genevieve Grantham, the necklace he offers you. It was my mother's, a relic of the House of Bourbon. When I refused to sign it over to him, he took his walking stick. He beat me, stripped me of my coat, and kicked me into the ditch to drown." A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room. The only sound was the crackle of the hearth and Genevieve's ragged breathing. Nathaniel did not shout. He did not curse. The fury that possessed him was not a fiery explosion, but a glacial, terrifying calm. It was the demeanor of an apex predator that had just locked onto its prey. "He pays the local constabulary," Genevieve choked out, misinterpreting his silence. "Chief Constable Miller dines at our table. If you hand me over, the law will compel you to do so. A husband's rights." "A husband's rights do not extend to murder," Nathaniel interrupted, his tone as hard as diamond. He gently reached out and lifted her from the floor, his touch shockingly tender given the dark wrath swirling in his eyes. He set her back upon the bed and pulled the heavy quilt over her trembling shoulders. "Furthermore," Nathaniel continued, pacing to the window and looking out over the rain-swept moors, "Mr. Grantham seems to have forgotten the Married Women's Property Act of 1882. The jewels you inherited are legally yours, independent of his control. He has not only committed attempted murder, he has committed grand larceny. He will lie. He will say I was attacked by thieves, and he took the jewels for safekeeping. It is my word against a wealthy, respected merchant. I am just a woman." "You are a woman under the protection of the Duke of Ashbourne," Nathaniel corrected her, turning back to face the bed. The raw authority in his voice commanded the room. "He believes you are dead in a ditch. He believes he has won. But Silas Grantham has made a fatal miscalculation. He has walked his stolen collateral straight into my bank." Nathaniel crossed the room and pulled the velvet bell cord. A moment later, a footman appeared in the doorway. "Bring me pen and parchment," Nathaniel ordered, "and tell the stable master to prepare my fastest rider. I am sending a wire to London immediately. To Chief Inspector James Monroe at Scotland Yard." Genevieve stared at him, her heart skipping a beat. Chief Inspector Monroe was a legendary figure in the Criminal Investigation Department, a man utterly immune to the bribes of provincial Yorkshire merchants. "You would do this? For a stranger?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nathaniel looked at her. He saw past the bruises, past the brokenness, and recognized a spirit that had refused to die in the freezing mud. Something within his own guarded, weary heart shifted irrevocably. "You are no longer a stranger, Genevieve," he said softly. "Rest now. Let the devil come to my door. I have a special kind of hell waiting for him." A week passed. To Genevieve, it felt like a fragile, suspended dream. Dr. Arbuthnot's poultices and missus. Higgins's rich broths worked miracles on her battered frame. The swelling around her eye faded, revealing irises the color of crushed violets. Though she still walked with a painful limp and her ribs ached when she laughed. The shadow of death had retreated from her face. During those quiet days, a tentative but profound bond formed between her and the Duke. Nathaniel spent his evenings in her chambers, reading aloud from Dickens and Dumas, or simply sitting in companionable silence while she sketched the moorland landscape from her window. She learned of the scandal that had driven him from London, a vicious rumor fabricated by a jealous rival that had tainted his family name. He learned of her impoverished childhood after her exiled mother's passing, and the desperate, foolish marriage to Silas that had promised security but delivered a nightmare. The morning of the meeting dawned crisp and clear. The Yorkshire sun cast long, golden shadows across the gravel driveway of Ashbourne Manor. At exactly 10 o'clock, a polished carriage bearing the Grantham crest pulled up to the grand entrance. Silas Grantham stepped out. He was a handsome man in a cruel, predatory sort of way, dressed impeccably in a tailored, worsted wool suit. He carried a silver-tipped walking stick, the very same one he had used to break Genevieve's ribs. He was escorted into the sprawling two-story library. Nathaniel sat behind a massive desk of carved mahogany. To the side of the room, half hidden in the shadows of the towering bookshelves, sat a quiet, unassuming man in a plain tweed suit, deeply engrossed in a volume of poetry. "Your Grace," Silas greeted, bowing smoothly. "It is an immense honor to be received in your home. I must say, the Ashbourne estate is a marvel." "Sit down, Mr. Grantham," Nathaniel replied. He did not offer his hand. His voice was polite, but it held the chill of a winter draft. Silas, blind to the icy reception in his arrogance, took a seat. "I assume Mr. Percival has briefed you on my proposal. I seek to acquire 3 new mills in Leeds. I require £50,000. As collateral, I bring you something quite extraordinary." Silas placed a velvet box onto the desk. He clicked the brass latch and opened it. Nestled in white silk was the Bourbon sapphire necklace. The massive, deep blue stones caught the morning light, practically glowing with historical opulence. "Authenticated by Garrard and Company in London just last year," Silas boasted, leaning back in his chair. "Valued at well over £60,000. It belonged to French royalty." Nathaniel reached out and lightly traced the silver setting of the necklace. "Exquisite," he murmured. "And how did a Yorkshire wool merchant come into possession of a Bourbon heirloom?" Silas manufactured a look of profound, practiced grief. He sighed heavily. "It was an inheritance belonging to my late wife. A tragedy, Your Grace. Just 10 days ago, we were traveling on the York Road. Our carriage was beset by highwaymen. I fought them off, but alas, my beloved Genevieve was dragged into the night and slain. They took her life, but in the chaos, I managed to secure the jewels." The man in the tweed suit by the bookshelves slowly closed his book. "Highwaymen!" Nathaniel repeated, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth ached. "A tragic tale. The local magistrate signed the death certificate?" "Indeed. Magistrate Higgins was most sympathetic to my loss." Silas lied smoothly. Her body was washed away in the flooded moors, never to be recovered. It has been a dark time, but commerce must continue. "It is what she would have wanted." "Fascinating," Nathaniel said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Because it seems your beloved wife had a rather miraculous resurrection. Or perhaps, Mr. Grantham, she simply refused to die where you dumped her." Silas frowned, his smug facade faltering for the first time. "I beg your pardon, Your Grace. I do not understand." "Allow me to clarify." Nathaniel's voice dropped an octave, resonating with sheer, unadulterated menace. He nodded toward the heavy oak doors of the library. The brass handles turned. Silas turned his head, annoyed by the interruption. Then, all the blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly, sickly gray. Genevieve stood in the doorway. She was flanked by Mrs. Higgins, but she stood under her own power. She wore a stunning emerald green gown belonging to Nathaniel's late sister, which only highlighted her aristocratic beauty. Though a faint, yellowish bruise still lingered on her cheekbone, she held her head high, her violet eyes burning with a fierce, cold fire. "Genevieve," Silas breathed, the silver-tipped walking stick slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the floor. "No, it cannot be." "Hello, Silas," Genevieve said, her voice steady, echoing in the dead silence of the library. "I am afraid I survived the storm, and the ditch, and your silver stick." Silas leapt to his feet, panic wild in his eyes. His charm instantly dissolved into desperate, animalistic rage. "This is a trick! You mad woman! You stole those from me!" "Your Grace, this woman is hysterical. She is my property, and I demand you release her into my custody, immediately." He took a threatening step toward Genevieve, reaching out to grab her arm. Nathaniel was out from behind the desk in a blur of motion. He seized Silas by the lapels of his expensive worsted suit and slammed him violently against the oak-paneled wall. The impact rattled the windows. "Touch her," Nathaniel whispered, his face inches from Silas's, his eyes burning with lethal intent. "And I will break every bone in your hands before I toss you to my hounds." Silas gasped for air, his feet dangling an inch off the ground. You cannot do this. I am a respected man. I will have you ruined. I will have the constabulary upon you." "I don't think the local constabulary will be of any use to you today, Mr. Grantham," a calm voice interrupted. The man in the tweed suit stepped out of the shadows. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a silver badge, holding it up to the light. "Chief Inspector James Monroe, Scotland Yard," the man introduced himself, his eyes devoid of any sympathy. "Under the Married Women's Property Act of 1882, those jewels belong solely to Mrs. Grantham. Furthermore, I have spent the last 3 days gathering evidence from your coachman, who, it turns out, is quite talkative when faced with the gallows as an accessory to murder." Silas stared at the badge, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The trap had closed. There was no way out. "Silas Grantham," Monroe continued, pulling a pair of heavy iron cuffs from his pocket. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of your wife, grand larceny, and fraud. I assure you, the magistrates in London will be far less sympathetic than the ones you bribe here in Yorkshire." Nathaniel released his grip, letting Silas collapse onto the floor in a pathetic, trembling heap. The imposing merchant had been reduced to nothing but a coward facing the ruin of his life. As Monroe dragged the blubbering Silas out of the library, Nathaniel turned to Genevieve. The hardened, dangerous edge in his posture melted away entirely. He crossed the room and gently took her hands in his. They were no longer trembling. "It is done," Nathaniel said softly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "He will never hurt you again." Genevieve looked up at him, a tear slipping down her cheek, not of fear, but of profound, overwhelming relief. She had been broken, discarded, and left to rot. But here, in the heart of the moors, she had been found. "I owe you my life, Nathaniel," she whispered, using his given name for the very first time. Nathaniel smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that made him look breathtakingly handsome. "No, Genevieve," he murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "I think you have just given me mine." The arrest of Silas Grantham sent shockwaves through the cobblestone streets of Yorkshire and echoed all the way to the gilded drawing rooms of London's high society. The Times ran sensational headlines, their ink dark with the scandal of a wealthy industrialist attempting to murder his aristocratic wife for French jewels. For a time, Ashbourne Manor became a fortress. Nathaniel doubled the guards at the estate gates, keeping the hungry press and the gossip-starved nobility firmly at bay. But the sanctuary of the moors could not last forever. In late November of 1884, the Crown summoned them to London. The trial was to be held at the Central Criminal Court, the infamous Old Bailey. Genevieve sat in the witness box, the dark oak paneling of the courtroom feeling like the walls of a coffin. The air was thick with the smell of damp wool, pomade, and the nervous sweat of the packed gallery. Across the room, flanked by two bailiffs, sat Silas. The weeks in Newgate prison had stripped him of his polished veneer. His face was gaunt, his worsted suit hung loose on his frame, and his eyes burned with the frantic, feral hatred of a cornered rat. His defense barrister, a ruthless man named Cornelius Finch, paced before the jury. Finch's strategy was clear. If he could not deny the violence, he would justify it through character assassination. "Mrs. Grantham," Finch began, hooking his thumbs into his waistcoat, "you claim your husband beat you for a necklace. Yet, is it not true that you were unfaithful? Is it not true that this—" "Duke," Finch gestured disdainfully toward Nathaniel in the gallery, "was your secret paramour? Did your husband not simply discover your treasonous affair and act in a sudden, understandable fit of impassioned rage?" A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. In the front row of the gallery, Nathaniel's jaw clenched so hard, a muscle feathered in his cheek. He placed a hand on the wooden railing, looking as though he might vault over it and strangle the barrister with his bare hands. Genevieve felt a cold sweat prickle at her neckline. She looked at Silas, who wore a sickly, triumphant smirk. Then she looked at Nathaniel. His storm-gray eyes met hers, anchoring her, reminding her of the fire she had found in the library at Ashbourne. Genevieve sat up straighter. She adjusted the dark velvet of her collar, drawing the court's attention to the faint, lingering yellow bruise that still marred her throat. "Mr. Finch," Genevieve said, her voice ringing clear and steady in the cavernous room, "I met His Grace, the Duke of Ashbourne, for the very first time when he pulled my bleeding, broken body from a freezing ditch. My husband did not view me as a woman capable of an affair. He viewed me as a vault that required breaking. He wanted the Bourbon sapphires to secure a bank loan. I refused. So he took his silver-tipped walking stick, shattered my ribs, and left me to the scavengers." She turned her gaze directly to the judge, the notoriously strict Justice William Hawkins. "If surviving an executioner makes me a criminal in the eyes of this court, then I am guilty, but I will not allow my character to be buried in the same mud where Silas Grantham left my body." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Justice Hawkins slammed his heavy wooden gavel, demanding silence. Finch's face flushed a deep, ugly red, his line of questioning entirely dismantled by her unwavering dignity. The trial lasted 3 more grueling days. Inspector Monroe presented the undeniable evidence: the blood-soaked muslin dress, the medical ledgers from Dr. Arbuthnot, detailing the horrific extent of her defensive wounds, and the damning, tearful testimony of Thomas Bates, Silas's own coachman, who confessed to watching his master kick Genevieve down the embankment. When the jury returned, they did not even need to deliberate through the lunch hour. "Guilty on all counts," the foreman announced. Justice Hawkins leaned over the bench, his eyes fixed on Silas with utter contempt. "Silas Grantham, you are a monster masquerading as a gentleman. You are hereby sentenced to penal servitude for life. You will be transported to the furthest reaches of the empire, where your wealth and your silver sticks will buy you nothing but misery." As the bailiffs dragged a screaming, thrashing Silas from the courtroom, Nathaniel quietly slipped out of the gallery. He made his way down the damp stone corridors of the Old Bailey holding cells. He stood in the shadows as the guards threw Silas into a barred cage to await the transport wagon. Silas grabbed the iron bars, panting, his eyes wild as he spotted the Duke's silhouette. "You think you have won, Linfield? You think she will love you? She is broken. She is ruined goods." Nathaniel stepped into the dim gaslight. The glacial calm that had terrified Silas in the library had returned. "She was never broken, Grantham," Nathaniel whispered, his voice echoing coldly against the wet stones. "She is forged of steel, And while you rot in the dark, chained to a rock at the edge of the world, I want you to remember that your greed gave me the greatest treasure of my life. Goodbye, Silas. Nathaniel turned and walked away, ignoring the string of vicious curses that followed him until the heavy iron door slammed shut, sealing Silas Grantham into history. Winter descended upon Yorkshire with a quiet, breathtaking grace. The violent storms of autumn gave way to serene, silent snowfalls that blanketed the moors in pristine white. Genevieve stood by the grand window of the Ashbourne Library, watching the snowflakes dance in the wind. She was legally a free woman. The marriage had been dissolved by an act of Parliament, expedited by Nathaniel's quiet but immense influence in the House of Lords. The Bourbon sapphire necklace was securely locked in the Ashbourne vaults, firmly in her name. The physical wounds had healed, leaving only pale, silver scars across her back, and arms scars she no longer hid, but wore as badges of her survival. You are staring into the cold again. Nathaniel's deep voice broke the quiet of the library. Genevieve turned, a soft smile immediately touching her lips. He walked toward her, holding 2 crystal glasses of warmed, spiced wine. He handed her one, his fingers deliberately brushing against hers. I was just thinking, Genevieve murmured, looking out at the snow. 3 months ago, I died out there. And yet, here I am, drinking wine in a castle. Ashbourne is a manor, not a castle, Nathaniel corrected gently, a teasing glint in his eye. It feels like a castle to me, she replied softly. You built a fortress around me, Nathaniel. You gave me my life back. I do not know how I can ever repay you. Nathaniel set his glass down on the mahogany desk. He stepped closer to her, the air between them suddenly crackling with an unspoken, heavy anticipation. He reached out, gently cupping her face, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her cheek where the bruised flesh had once been. I do not want your repayment, Genevieve, he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. I have spent my life guarding my family name, hiding in this manner, trusting no one. Then I found a woman in the mud who fought off death with her bare hands. You brought light back into these halls. You brought it back into me. He reached into the pocket of his waistcoat and pulled out a small, black velvet box. Genevieve's breath hitched. She recognized the box. It was the one Silas had brought to the bank. Nathaniel opened it. But the heavy, ostentatious bourbon necklace was gone. In its place, resting on the white silk, was a single, flawless sapphire, reset into an elegant, delicate band of platinum. I had it dismantled, Nathaniel explained, his eyes never leaving hers. The past should not hang heavy around your neck. It should be a reminder of your strength, worn on your own terms. Genevieve, will you do me the absolute honor of becoming my wife? Not out of duty, not out of rescue, but because I love you, utterly and completely. Tears blurred Genevieve's vision, but this time they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. The dark ghost of Silas Grantham vanished forever, replaced by the warm, steady reality of the man standing before her. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, Nathaniel, I will. He slipped the sapphire ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a fierce, tender passion that chased away the last lingering chill of the Yorkshire moors. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the scars of the past, leaving only a bright, untouched world waiting for them to begin anew. If you were captivated by Genevieve's journey from the freezing mud to the warm halls of Ashbourne Manor, please hit the like button and share this tale of justice and romance with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, heart-stopping historical dramas delivered straight to your feed. Your support helps us bring more incredible real-life stories to life. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Primal Bond Living, the owner and manager of Primal Bond Living. After watching the video, she was beaten and left on the side of the road, A duke found her and brought her home. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was the contrast between cruelty and compassion. Seeing someone abandoned at their lowest point is heartbreaking, but the moment the Duke chose to help instead of turning away gave the story a powerful emotional shift. Sometimes people don't need grand gestures at first. They just need someone willing to see their pain and offer safety when the world has been unkind to them. Do you think the Duke helped her out of instinct, or was there something about her that immediately touched him emotionally? And why do you think stories about healing and protection resonate so deeply with people? I think stories like this remind us that kindness during someone's darkest moment can leave a lasting impact far beyond what we realize. If this story stayed with you emotionally, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy historical romance stories filled with healing, emotional tension, and unexpected devotion, feel free to like and subscribe only if you'd like to see more.